My dad and brother destroyed my life's work and got me institutionalized, so I took them down with a secret burner phone. 6 months later, my dad whispered, "It's not over." He was right, but not the way he thought. My brother Blake is a 28-year-old man-child who thinks getting a job means feeding the Matrix. So instead, he spends all his time playing Fortnite with random teenagers online and refuses to eat anything other than Popeyes. Meanwhile, I'm a junior in high school who is planning on growing up to be anything other than what Blake has become. And I was never good at math, history, any of that. There was only one talent that I was blessed with, and that was art. I first started when I was a child. It was my only outlet for how upset it made me when Blake was treated like some sort of king by my parents. My art teacher, Ms. Thompson, and guidance counselor, Ms. Thompson, ended up being my greatest supporters. They believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. So when they swore that I had a strong chance of getting into a top art school, I caved and finally applied. Because even though I personally thought my art was mid, everyone around me seemed pretty impressed. I told my parents this, expecting them to give some sort of congratulations or even a hug. Instead, they just nodded and continued their conversation about work. But that's when I said the magic words. "This way I can help fund Blake's lifestyle." The entire vibe of the room switched. "Honey, that's great! We are so proud of you!" They both exclaimed practically in unison. That's when they volunteered for me to use the garage. I immediately moved all my art stuff in, including my canvases and old paintings I had. The next day I was painting in the nook I had set up for myself when I heard the garage door open. What the actual F? I just bought this motorcycle, so you're gonna have to take your little arts and crafts elsewhere." He tried to make his voice assertive, but I stopped taking him seriously a long time ago. So I sighed and told him that my art could make a lot of money, meaning he could keep avoiding the Matrix. Luckily, this worked almost instantly, and he walked away with his shoulders slouched in defeat. Until last weekend, when my next battle popped up. I was painting in the garage when my dad called and asked if I could buy the family groceries. Well, it was more like a demand, since he was shouting at the top of his lungs. I knew there was no point arguing, so I abandoned my painting and left. I must have driven around to 4 different Aldis looking for the specific meat he asked me to get, because I knew if I came home with anything other than what he asked for, he'd let my brother wail on me. So 3 hours later, when I finally got home and unpacked everything, I went back to my painting. But when I glanced over to my nook in the top left corner, it was empty. And in its place was the sorry excuse for a motorbike that Blake was crushing on. I pinched the bridge of my nose and tried to grab my paintings, consoling myself with the thought of relocating to my friend's house. But they were ruined. He had shoved them all to the floor face down, and the rainwater from our parents' car had absolutely soaked them through. I felt a rage crawl up my spine. Those pieces took a collective of over 200 hours. They were my bread and butter, and my key to get into art school. I thought about telling him off, about telling my parents, but then reality hit me. They wouldn't care. They never did. Suddenly everything went silent, and I felt like I was the smallest person to ever exist. I cried so much my throat felt raw, and my eyes swelled to double their size. "Mom," I said when I went inside. My voice was quiet, completely defeated. Blake destroyed all my art stuff. I expected her to just shrug her shoulders, but no. "What?" she asked angrily. I didn't have time to say anything else because she stormed up to Blake's room and flung the door open. I obviously sat nearby to listen. "What the actual F were you thinking? That girl is our way out of the financial hole." For a while, there was silence. My entire body tensed up. That's when I heard it. The sound of a heavy book being flung across the room. "How dare you talk to me about that ugly betch and her little dreams to make me feel bad? Get the F out." The door slammed, and outside I could hear my mom silently sobbing into her flannel. My heart broke. That's when I finally realized my mom was just as scared of the angry men in our house as me. The next day at school, I went straight to the guidance counselor. But this time it wasn't to talk about my art. It was to betray my entire family. I showed her the cuts all over my body and finally confessed they were from Blake and my dad. I told her about what happened last night. The paintings, my mom, everything laid out on the table. Her face went ghost white. "You can't go home tonight," she said, voice shaking. "What about my mom?" "Our priority has to be you, my love, but your mom will be safe soon." I nodded while wiping my tears with an old tissue. That night, I was placed into emergency foster care. I was told that the next morning CPS would be raiding my house. But when they did, my mom denied anything ever happened, told them I was losing it. They played the part so well that CPS believed them without even talking to me first. And that's how I spent the next 6 months in a mental institution. 6 months of being medicated for problems I didn't have. The pills made my head foggy, my thoughts slow and disjointed. The white walls of my room seemed to close in on me each night. 6 months of therapy sessions where I was told I was projecting and creating false